What is up, everybody? We got some breaking news, so we're going to come in here with some instant reactions. Emergency podcast. Ryan Talbot is in class right now. He'll be available around 2:30. So I had to go and get my good buddy Carl Jones, WROC in Rochester, pinch hitting for us today. What is up, my man? How are you?
I'm all good. Good Friday. I guess Brandon Bean trying to drop some nuggets on us heading into the weekend, so I can't be too mad at us. He give us some content for the next few days or so.
And we have a lot to dive into here because I will tell you right now. So the Bills signed Chase Claypool, and probably we talked about Keon Coleman being a polarizing player in the draft. When you want to talk about the definition of a polarizing player, Chase Claypool fits that mold more than anybody. So I want to take you back to February, and I was starting to do my work on the free agent class. And I put out in our insider text line, I said, I got 5 targets for the Bills at wide receiver. And I said, number 1 on that list would be Curtis Samuel, but I'm not including him here because I just thought at the time he might be out of the Bills' price range. He signed a 3-year, $34 million deal with the Washington Commanders. So I thought he'd get around there. The Bills got him for less than that. So I'd have had him on the list. Number 1 was Odell Beckham Jr. Number 5 was Chase Claypool. And I'll tell you right now, Carl, the reaction on Claypool in the insider chat was like, no, at all costs. There's this vibe around this guy. And obviously it hasn't gone right. I mean, he has this breakout rookie season, has 11 touchdown catches in 2020. And then for the next 3 seasons, basically falls off a cliff. He can't find protection anywhere. 3 teams in 3 years. The Steelers traded to the Bears, traded to the Dolphins. It doesn't work anywhere. What are your first thoughts on this player and now adding him to the mix with this Bills wide receiver room?
Yeah, just the player in general, I think it adds that similar body type that they've kind of been chasing over the past year or so in terms of the bigger body outside guys, whether that's a Chase Claypool or Justin Shorter, Keon Coleman, obviously, and then Mac Hollins, who they acquired earlier this offseason as well. So clearly they're trying to acquire some bigger bodied guy who can be an effective blocker on the perimeter, be your dunk artist out there, whatever the case may be. So I think that was my first thought. Secondly, I mean, you're taking a flyer on a guy who has shown in the past he has potential to be an effective player in this league, and you just want to figure out for your own research and your own reason why it hasn't worked out over the past few years. You're like, okay, Mike McDaniel, cool, whatever. You might be a good coach. Yeah, whatever's going on in Chicago. But we want to figure out for our own eyes and our own study here why this player who has a ton of potential and came out as I believe it's a 2nd round pick, why he hasn't been able to reach his full potential as a player. So I think from that perspective, and once again, it's a 90-man roster this time of year. It's not like he's taking away a roster spot from a budding superstar in this league, or whatever the case may be. I think it's a good opportunity to bring someone in who can maybe get back some of that juice that he had, I believe, 3 or 4 years ago.
I think you made a couple of really good points in there. First of all, what Brandon Bean has kind of looked at the receiver position, bringing in bigger bodied guys. They've been a very small team outside of Gabe Davis. They had Isaiah Hodgins there for a minute. He never really saw the field. They've leaned into these small wide receivers. And I think what they think now is, all right, Josh Allen has developed. You don't need to, fit yourself into one specific box. And I think Joe Brady's the one that's probably screaming from the rooftops, like, get me some guys that can win in space. I know that not everybody fits into that mold, and I don't know where Claypool is at as a route runner, as a separator. I don't know if that was really ever part of his game. He just wanted to kind of get on you, run past you. Kind of feels like he's the Gabe Davis replacement, because if you go back to his rookie season where he won, some of his big time highlights were just running by guys. And Ben Roethlisberger, and here's another part of this. His best season was with Ben Roethlisberger at the very end of his ability to be competent. Like his last year, Ben Roethlisberger in 21, when Claypool's stats fell off, that was a version of Roethlisberger that had just fallen off. I mean, he couldn't even remember him at the end, man. He was struggling with just like 10-yard throws. I mean, everything looked like a struggle for him. And some of those deep balls in 2020, when Ben was still able to kind of heave it up there, I'm thinking like you've upgraded that position with Josh Allen, what he's able to do throwing down the field. If anybody was going to be able to unlock some potential for Claypool, to me, it's Allen. And listen, I'm not trying to oversell this addition. He's a camp body at this point until he proves that he's not. They probably got him at a very small number, and I'm guessing the veteran minimum. He's not done anything over the last 2 seasons, but it's worth a dart throw if you can unlock some of what he brought. And I think the Bills were high on him during the draft process as well.
If you want to take a step back and have some reasons, I'm not going to say excuses here, but some reasons why as to maybe it hasn't worked out in the past. You alluded to the situation in Pittsburgh. Let's take it back to Chicago, where outside of DJ Moore, no one on that offense has really been able to get any footing. The quarterback situation was struggling. The offensive line situation wasn't great. The OC is now gone. So, like, everything over there in Chicago was a dysfunction. That's a reason why maybe Claypool couldn't get things done. And then he goes to Miami mid-season, which by all accounts, the Kyle Shanahan tree, which Mike McDaniel is an extension of that offense is very complex. So now you're asking someone to learn that on the fly mid-season. That's not the easiest thing to do, right? Also, I know the Dolphins are high-flying, and like because of Tyreek Hill and Jayden Waddle, they play a lot of like smash-mouth football that is disguised by high flying because they have track stars on the team. Like there's a lot of 2 wide receiver sets where they're going deep shots and over the middle. So maybe Claypool never got his footing because he wasn't on the field enough to get the reps that he would get otherwise. So those are maybe some reasons as to why he hasn't been able to get back to where he was before. But it is hard to ignore the missteps and the reasons why he hasn't been able to produce, because if you're a baller, you can usually figure out ways to contribute in the NFL, and of late he hasn't been able to do so. I just can't get out of my head the Taylor Rapp interception. I believe week 17 or 18, whenever that was, where he rounded that corner out. Like it was really rounded, and there was just the lack of the attention to detail. And Tua and Mike McDaniel didn't throw him under the bus after the game. They would never do that. They aren't those type of guys. But you could tell that route wasn't as clean as it needed to be. And that was the one thing I thought of. I'm like, that attention to detail is maybe why he hasn't been able to pop and get back to where he was before. So now you're hoping that being around a Josh Allen, being around a Joe Brady, and some other guys who've had some nice success in this league, that he can get back to being a real detail-oriented player.
Yeah, I like that point a lot. And I think for a guy that struggled, like he started in a place that's known for their culture in Pittsburgh with Mike Tomlin, you mentioned, right? Like the ability to bring guys in, get the best out of them, especially earlier in their careers. I mean, it was like the wide receiver for a while there. I mean, the way they were hitting on day 2 picks, it was really good. And then obviously the Antonio Brown situation, the way that transpired is really interesting. Like I think that Claypool came in at a time for Pittsburgh where there wasn't a lot of leadership in that locker room. Like I remember going back to that year, and I think that was my 2nd or 3rd year on the beat. And I just was like taken aback at like Juju Smith-Schuster with the TikTok videos and like dancing on opposing like logos on the road and then posting it. Like that's what Claypool came into the league, and he had so much success early on that I wonder how much of that just went to his head, and he didn't have anybody to be like, young fella, come over here. Let me show you the ropes a little bit. One thing that you could say for sure, and this is something I've always argued about the Bills. A lot of people in the comments, a lot of people in the text chain, they talk about, I thought the Bills only want culture guys. Like this isn't a culture fit. See, where I push back a little bit on that point, because I think you build a culture to bring guys like this in and help them find the best version of themselves. That's what John McDermott always talks about, what he always preaches. You want to go out and you want to get good football players. And listen, in 2020, I don't think anybody would argue that Chase Claypool wasn't a good football player. It's in there somewhere, and it's worth a very cheap, non-guaranteed dart throw.
Yeah, I do want to make this clear about the Chase Claypool culture stuff. You didn't mention this, but for anyone who was wondering, he's not like a criminal or anything of that sort, or anything that you have to worry about that. It's more of the effort and the attention to detail of things that are lacking right now, or that haven't been consistent to this point in his career. You mentioned the TikTok stuff that was very apparent back then in Pittsburgh. He was participating in some of that, and it rubbed a lot of the Steeler faithful the wrong way. It was, if Mike Tomlin couldn't get a hold of it, that's how you know it was getting a little out of hand. And then just some of the effort and attention to detail stuff that popped up during his tenure in Chicago and Miami. Those are the things that that was apparent and that rubbed some of the fan bases and some of the teams the wrong way. Nothing criminal related, nothing where he's, a head case and being a cancer. It's just more of the, like, man, like, just lock in just for 60 minutes. Like, you got this. Like, don't worry about any of the other stuff. That's more of the stuff that's plagued him to this point in his career. No criminal record, no anything of the sort. So when you mention a culture guy, this is the type of stuff that a strong culture that Sean McDermott has put together here in Orchard Park over the past few years should be able to get a guy back on track.
I will say too, it's interesting that the room and the offense in general, like, it really is on Josh Allen to be that, like, veteran leader now. You mean, look at the wide receiver room. I think Mac Hollins helps, and I think Brandon Beane made a point to mention Hollins as somebody that, like, his DNA, you're already seeing what that's meant in the building. So, but really, it's Josh Allen that's going to be setting the culture, the agenda, the leadership, all that kind of stuff. And I think he's ready for that role. And I think, there's so many guys in this building that have been brought here after what happened over the last couple of years to really unlock what the true potential of this team is with Josh Allen in his prime. There's almost like this urgency that I feel like is going to be felt across the wide receiver room to be like, people are going to be fighting for these jobs because of the potential special nature that this offense could reach in 2024.
Yeah, you talk about, like, the competitive and the fighting aspect of this. Let's say the guys who are for certain making this team: Curtis Samuel with the guaranteed money, Khalil Shakir based off his play, Keon Coleman, and then you can throw in Mac Hollins as well, just based off of Brandon Beane talking about him. And I believe what he brings as a special teams player, proven on the field, as well as an adequate receiver. I think those four guys are for certain. After that, if you want to make this roster, if you're a Chase Claypool, a Tyrell Shavers, Justin Shorter, things of that nature, you better sure that you fall in line and make sure that you're balling on and off the field. So this is where, if you're someone like a Chase Claypool, where you do get traded to the Bears midseason, or you do get picked up by the Dolphins midseason, you have a pretty good idea you're going to make the roster. Not saying that you're going to slack off because you still want to play, but if there's an opportunity for you to play, make the 53, and then be active on Sundays, get your act together, listen to Josh Allen, listen to Joe Brady, everything they got to say and what they got going on, because there is a legit competition to make the roster. There isn't like, this is the roster that's set and I'm just here to be a camp body. Like, if you want to play, get your image back in this NFL, get your image back in this league. What's a better way to do it than with someone like Josh Allen, where there are a bunch of targets still to be given out on this team?
Anthony Romeo in the chat was like, Matt spoke this into existence. Puke emoji, LOL. I did put him, because listen, this is the kind of thing that I think good teams are able to do. Like, you're not getting a lot of second round picks, which, I mean, we'd be going into his potential second contract at the number they're going to get him at. I mean, for a veteran minimum kind of contract. And that's where we got to kind of shift gears here, because the number one guy on my list for the Bills, who I still like despite some pushback there, was Odell Beckham Jr., who now lands in Miami on a 1-year deal. Reportedly, our guy Marcel Louis-Jacques, 1 year, $3 million base. Incentives could reach it up to $8 million. And I think my first instinct is like, okay, why didn't the Bills get in on this? And I wonder if they just went down the road with him, the Von Miller connection, like a year ago. It never materialized. And maybe that was the end of that conversation. Didn't go well in Baltimore last year. I think that it was a tough fit, because from the way that team operates offensively, it doesn't put multiple receivers in a position to be successful. And Odell Beckham Jr. he's a volume guy. Like, I feel like that when he was starting to get fed the ball in LA at the end there, especially in the Super Bowl, you saw how he was able to unlock his skill set. He goes to Miami now and gives them great depth at the very least. But how do you see those three players playing together, vibing together, if you will?
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting wide receiver room. You got Tyreek and Odell, who are very, not in a bad way, but just big personality guys. Jalen Waddle, who's very reserved. Braxton Berrios has his own type of thing. I will say that he's definitely an upgrade over anything that Berrios or Cedric Wilson provided them last year. I do think that is apparent. Like, I know that Odell's counting stats and raw stats from last year aren't very impressive, but like you just alluded to, Baltimore isn't conducive to have multiple threats eat at one time. You had Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely. Like, not all those guys are going to put up gaudy numbers in that offense. But in this offense in Miami, where if you're the number 3 guy, and last year, as we saw, once you take away Tyreek Hill, especially down the stretch, it was really difficult for the other guys to really get off and do theirs. So having a guy like Odell Beckham Jr. kind of frees up the offense to a certain extent. I'm still concerned about the other parts of the offense, most notably their interior offensive line. But I think it helps out. I truly do. I still think he has some stuff left in the tank. I mean, you can't watch what he did last year and think that he's washed. Like, I don't think that's fair to say whatsoever. Like, sure, he's not the guy who was lighting up NYC a decade ago. Like, yeah, that guy's gone. But like, he still can be a very productive player in his league, especially at a number 3 role. For the Dolphins to get him in that position where you're counted on to be single covered against nickel cornerbacks, things of that nature. Like, I think that's a match made in heaven for him, especially at this point in his career.
Why I think the Bills go this route with Claypool, which probably was half the money guaranteed, is because you're still in this 7-year window with Brandon Beane and his scouting staff, and they were able to do the kind of work. And we always talk about, like, from the media side, when we do the deep dive on the draft players, it's like you do all of that work, you're going to end up with 7 to 10 players that actually come to the team that you cover. But all the work that you do on all these players is going to really pay off years later. Chase Claypool that year in 2020 was mocked to the Bills, kind of like Brian Thomas Jr. was mocked to the Bills this year. Like, it was a very similar deal. Like, the speed, the production at Notre Dame on the scouting trail, there was a couple of, there's a lot of smoke around them being connected. So you wonder how much the Bills lean on that, their experience with Claypool back then, to give them the kind of confidence to at least just give you an invite to training camp, see what it looks like once you get them in their building. And the timing of this makes a ton of sense. The Bills weren't going to add him before, there wasn't probably a bunch of people knocking down his door, to be honest with you, but you add him now. It doesn't, factor into the comp pick formula. Everything from this point on is just house money, because none of that's going to count. And you had Gabe Davis leaving in free agency, Leonard Floyd leaving in free agency, signing big contracts. The Bills are hoping to get a couple of comp picks back next year. They're probably not, counting on them, but hoping for them after what happened a couple months ago.
You speak on scouting and going back to 2019 and 2020. I had a front row seat to Chase Claypool back in the college playing days. Played against them at Notre Dame when I was at Syracuse. They kicked the living teeth out of us at Yankee Stadium. It wasn't a good one, but you talk about like what he provided, and back then, lining up across from him, he was big, he was fast, he was blocking. He was one of those annoying receivers. Like, he was blocking like after the whistle. Like, dude, I'm not trying to like do this. Like, it's too cold for you to be blocking me. Like, I'm not the biggest guy already. I'm like 190. He's like 230, 240, whatever the case may be. I'm like, bro, I'm not trying to see this. And like, at the time, I'm not gonna lie, I thought that he was going to be a really darn good player in the league, just based off his physical measurables. He was really good on the outside in terms of like, he wasn't Keon Coleman type dunk artist, but he was very comfortable living in that world of 50-50 balls. I think that's safe to say. He was lined up across Miles Boykin, who I thought he was better than. I don't know if Boykin's still in the league, but that was another receiver that Notre Dame had at the time. But yeah, drawing back, listen, you could have put me in the Bills scouting department back then, and I would have brought him in on a top 30 visit. He was that type of player at the time, and I didn't expect his career would turn out like this. But of course, there's much more that goes into a player than just what he does on the field. But yeah, back then, I thought this was a player who could be productive just based off his physical tools alone.
All right, let's move this thing along a little bit. I mentioned the Insider text line a couple of times, and you can join right now for free for 2 weeks. 2-week free trial. Just text 716-528-6727 or go to joinsubtext.com/shoutbuffalobills. Put your number in there. You'll get instructions back. You can get yourself locked in, and Ryan and I are going to be providing even more coverage over the next month as the Bills rookie minicamp starts next week. We will be a bit out at the facility. 3 weeks of OTAs practices and then mandatory minicamp before the short break ahead of training camp. And the Shout text line is brought to you by Carrie C. Byer, attorney with the law offices of Francis M. Litro, located at 237 Main Street in Buffalo, New York. If you or someone you know is seriously injured, give them a call, 716-852-1234, or check out litrolaw.com. All right, Carl, the Bills have been busy the last 24 hours. They bring in not just Chase Claypool, but they sign defensive end pass rusher, former third-round pick, Dawuane Smoot, who is coming off of a disappointing season in 2022. He had the torn Achilles, so not a surprise to see the production dip last year. He had 14 pressures, which was a huge drop. He hadn't been that low since 2018, played all 7 of his seasons with the Jaguars. But in 2022 and 2021, pass rush grades at 73.9 and 73.4, according to Pro Football Focus. His best season came 7 sacks, 50 total pressures back in 2021. What do you think of the signing? And, you know, this is the depth piece. I mean, if you were looking at all these positions, we did a show on Wednesday night talking about which position had you most worried about the Bills. And I had edge rusher. And this is a guy that you add into the mix, kind of the new version of Shaq Lawson in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think that's where I was going to go with this. He's listed at 6'3", 275, which is a big defensive end. That's a big boy on the outside. And so when you expect a player of those measurables, you want him to be a guy who's effective in the run. If he gets a sack or if he makes any contribution in the passing game, that's an added bonus. But those big guys who are 6'3", 275, they're not bending the edge. They're not going to, speed past any offensive tackles, any spin moves or anything of the nature, but you want them to be effective in their role, do their 111th, as Sean McDermott likes to say all the time. But he's not going to be anything eye-popping, just like Shaq Lawson made plays from time to time, but you wanted them to be effective and not be a net negative when they're out there on the field. I think that's what the Bills are trying to go for, and every team, quite frankly, this time of year. Get players who, when they're out there, they're spelling the starters, but also they aren't net negatives. We aren't worried that they're out there. We don't have to change our game plan and change our playbook based off the fact that Dawuane Smoot is on the field. It's like, oh man, now we got to send more coverage to his side or put more run fits to his side because he's out there. Like, no, you want to make sure that he can still do the playbook. He may not be able to go above and beyond what's asked him to do, but as long as he can do what he's asked to do, that's all that matters. Hopefully, now that he's more than a year removed from that Achilles injury, not everyone recovers from it the same. Hopefully, he's back to where he was before, because if so, the Bills truly get a big value signing at this point in the year. Because also, I believe Leonard Floyd was taken this time of year. Not saying he's Leonard Floyd. That is high expectations for someone coming off an Achilles and based off the year he just had. But those are the type of value guys that you're looking at this time of year.
Yeah, and I think that the Bills, you look at the free agent class at this point, and it wasn't really exciting. I mean, the guys that, you're looking at, probably like a Yannick Ngakoue, who, where his strength has been off the edge, bringing pressure, and he just hasn't done it at a high level over the last 2 seasons. And you have to really believe in that guy if you're going to add him to the mix. And I think Smoot, still young enough to where I feel like you feel confident about getting a year out of him. He can push, young passers like pass rushers like Javon Solomon, who they just drafted in the 5th round, Kingsley Jonathan for maybe a roster spot. I'm very interested to hear the Bills talk about him when we get the next opportunity, like Sean McDermott, especially how they view him and how similar this is to the Leonard Floyd. The Leonard Floyd was a once in a cycle kind of move. Like, those kinds of pass rushers usually don't become available at that time at the number that they were able to get him at, especially coming off of a Super Bowl 2 years earlier. I think the Von Miller effect had a lot to do with that signing. So I think getting Smoot at this value at this time, it feels like a high upside move and another very low risk move. And those are going to be the moves that Brandon Beane makes at this time. Yeah,
like even when you look at the receiver class, DJ Chark would have been someone that the Bills could have acquired, but he's now out in sunny Los Angeles. So the free agent class across the board this year, Justin Simmons, who is still out there, he's probably the best player available, but I highly doubt they'll be into him based off the Cole Bishop acquisition via the draft and then what they did in free agency earlier with Mike Edwards. But just across the board in many positions, I don't think you're going to get a Leonard Floyd impact where, hey, there's a guy who's giving you 10+ sacks or is a above replacement level player. Like, when you just look at, like you said, receiver, defensive end, even D tackle, safety as well, outside of Justin Simmons, you weren't getting that type of value. So now you're just trying to get players who fit the playbook, fit the scheme, the culture, things of that nature, or get a reclamation project like a Chase Claypool, who is very, very cheap this time of year.
The Bills added to their linebacker room as well, bringing in Deion Jones, who played last season with the Carolina Panthers, had a stop in Cleveland, played his first 6 in Atlanta, some of his best seasons. I mean, he was a regular starter for the Falcons over that time, went to Cleveland as primarily a backup, started 5 games for them in 2022 due to injury, and then only 3 last year in Carolina. So a guy at the the opposite end of his career, probably looking to hang on into the league, but had some production at times, has some ball skills. You look at his career numbers, and the tackles are fine. The tackles for a loss doesn't really hit you, but the passes defended and the interceptions and touchdowns. He has 13 career interceptions in 8 seasons and 5 career touchdowns as a linebacker. I think you like that, adding that kind of experience, that ability in coverage. That's never a bad thing when you can add at that position, knowing who the Bills have to play in this gauntlet of an AFC.
Yeah, the first thing that came to mind when they signed Deion Jones, and it was what Brandon Beane said earlier about Matt Milano in terms of him maybe not being ready for the day one of training camp. You need bodies to get through the summer as well. Like they have OTAs coming up, they have minicamp coming up, and whenever Matt Milano comes back, he isn't going to be full throttle the first day he arrives on the practice field. So you need to put players out there for a second and third team. And prior to that, they didn't have that. And the fact that they were able to get a linebacker who has been a valuable player in this league, who has those instincts like you just alluded to, which is rare to see as a linebacker. He has his other issues at this point in his career, but it's funny. If you said this back in 2020, the Bills just got like one of the better linebackers in the league, but it's quickly how things change in the National Football League. But that was my first instinct. Like, they need guys, period. You need a first, second, and third string. You've been out there for practices. You know how they roll through the lines and different things of that nature. So as someone who played spring ball, and the fact that you got to get to fall camp, you need the third stringers, all right? Because the first teamers can't go all day in practice. So having someone like a Deion Jones who can maybe be on your second team and help guys out and rotate things of that nature, and get another veteran in the room with Matt Milano on the men for the majority of this summer helps out a ton with that experience in that relatively young room.
We got to chop it up with you before the draft, but now that since the draft has happened, what's your like overarching reaction to the haul of players that Brandon Beane left the draft with?
The first one is the fact that they went for leadership type of guys, good captain, a lot of, I believe, 4 captains in the class. And I think that they did a good job with getting guys who kind of fit what they do. Cole Bishop, obviously, with him being a defensive back, you knew that I was going to be locked in and keen into what he does at Utah. And I like the fit. He kind of reminds me of a Jordan Poyer-esque type of player in terms of his role. He did a lot of things from that 0 to 15 range. I like Keon Coleman is obviously polarizing, but based off what Josh Allen wanted out of a receiver, and clearly he wanted him, and what maybe the Bills are kind of leaning towards this year with this Joe Brady regime. I think that they're going all in with that archetype of receiver. Ray Davis, I think, will have a bigger impact than maybe some would like to believe. I know that James Cook has been a very valuable back in this league, but 3-down running backs, which Ray Davis was in Kentucky, are rare to see in 2024. So considering that he's bringing this skill set to the NFL, will be very intriguing to see how it transpires this summer. And then they took some flyers on day 3, which I believe you should do 10 times out of 10, especially at the tackle position. My man out of the UK, shout out to Travis Clayton. That will be a fun story to watch and see if it turns out. Hopefully, for the Bills' perspective, they get another Jordan Mailata story with a guy going from rugby to the NFL and becoming a darn good player. I think that was what they did for the first 2 days. They went for those very productive players, but also good guys in terms of cultural fits. And then on day 3, we're throwing 80-yard Hail Marys, and hopefully one of them bad boys catch it. Great
stuff as always. Coming in, I texted Carl at, 11:50, and I'm like, emergency podcast, Talbot's unavailable. You ready to rock and roll? And he's like, I'm free. Let's go. Let's run it. And man, I really appreciate you doing that today.
Hey man, if you stay ready, you never got to get ready. That's what my grandmother used to say. I didn't know what she meant at the time, but I get it now.
And then you got Anthony Romeo in the comments. Carl, how about the hype for SU football this year? Go Orange. Are you on the hype train, or are you wait and see?
Nah. I'm all in. I'm all
Okay.
aboard. Anyone who want to come get on the train with me, I got you. Obviously can't go to the games this year with covering the Bills, but I'm beyond excited, and I truly think with the schedule we have, no Florida State or Clemson, Fran Brown recruiting some SEC type of guys to the Northeast. Okay, hey, listen, it's still May. Don't get my heartbeat going too fast, but I am very excited for the Orange this upcoming fall.
Carl Jones, you can find him on Twitter at Jones11_ over at WROC in Rochester. We'll see you out hopefully the next couple of weeks for practice. My man, thank you so much. Hey, everybody, May 17th, 6 p.m. Ryan and I will be back at Wingnuts. It'll be our rookie mini camp edition, start of OTAs preview, live show. Come out, hang with us. Great wings, delicious beers, the best company, talking Bills football. It is going to be awesome. We can't wait to see you guys all out there. 6 p.m., May 17th. Put it in your calendar, and we'll see you then. Ryan and I will be back next week. Enjoy your weekend. Take care, everybody.